Okay, there's some pretty sizable cracks in here. I want to make this into a little slab for a little tiny cabinet project I got going on. But I gotta fix all these. They're pretty bad. Okay, here's what I've worked up so far. What I do know about this is I salvaged this off of a campsite that we're building. It is cedar for sure. It's been left out in the weather for who the heck knows how long time. So my basic plan is to plane this down with the router after it dries a little bit. This was just so far damaged. I'm hoping that it'll all stay in basically one piece. And then there's some pretty sizable holes. This one you can't really see through it, but it goes all the way through it. So at some point I'm going to fill this up with epoxy, but I wanted the wood to bond to the wood as well as it could before I get into that stage. Don't know if this is going to work. This is the second go around. I removed the clamps and the ties and everything from the first round. This time I tried to squeeze it all into all the end grain. There was tons of cracks everywhere, and tighten up as best I could. Hopefully it sucks it down and makes it more like one piece of wood. Next thing I'm going to do is just freehand some of these high spots down. Got my router bit set for just barely, maybe 1/8 of an inch. Some of these, I mean, it was just rough cut with the saw, so it's pretty uneven. Later I'll put a jig in, but this is really just to expose some more cracks so I can glue it some more. Okay, this is a really rough finish. I was basically just trying to plane this down so I have something manageable and then also expose a little more of these cracks. I took about up to 1/2 of an inch on some spots and then nothing in, you know, like right here hasn't even been touched, just to get it somewhat flat. Now hopefully we can start actually making this into something. So basically, the further I router down, the more cracks I find. So I went through, filled the whole thing full of glue one more time, spread a bunch of sawdust on it, squeezed it into the cracks, just totally drenched it in wood. Hopefully this is going to be the last time, and then we can just sand it down, plane it down one more time, and then start with the clear coat. So this is what it looks like after a couple passes with the router on the jig and 50 grit on the belt sander. Next I'm going to put some epoxy in these holes, fill that up, then we'll go from there. I want to point out that this log at one point had been set on fire. Just goes to show it's amazing what you can bring something back from. Here's the deal. Got everything taped up from the one side. This is the polyester resin I'm using. My thought is to put about 1/8 of an inch over the whole thing at first, and then we'll move on to the next step. For the record, packaging tape. That's the one. Don't use the other tape. None of them work. So I put in, this is probably a little heavier than 1/8 of an inch, just to plug some of these holes, just for a first layer. So this hasn't been sanded or anything, and this stuff is pretty transparent. We gotta smooth this out, but I never did a final sand on this anyways. I'm planning on taking this down, but there you go. You can see through every little part, although it looks kind of solid. This was a Sky vodka bottle, in case you're curious. You get the idea. Hopefully I don't have to tell anyone to be careful with this. Obviously we're smashing glass, it's sharp. Put it in all these little cracks, and then I'm going to fill that up with a little bit of resin. Got that polyester resin dumped in there now. So that's after sanding it up to about 120, I think it was. You can't really start to make out this glass. It's too foggy. So we gotta sand it some more. There's basically where we're at so far. And it's not actually blue epoxy, it's just the blue glass behind it. It's clear epoxy. 3 colors. Purple, blue. This one has a little tiny bit of green in it. Kind of hard to tell in this lighting. They come in these little sample packets. Same stuff that Peter Brown uses. If you wound up on this video, you've probably seen Peter Brown before. Same stuff he uses. Same epoxy as well. This is sanded up through 220. Let me tell you, sanding this epoxy sucks. It gums up the sandpaper so incredibly fast, so you got to constantly switch it. But you can see there's a couple flaws in it. Little tiny pinholes everywhere. Some of the cracks. I don't know, a couple cracks that need filled up. So I will get that all done with the next coat. And then maybe 2 coats if it needs to. And then we'll start clear coating the entire top with epoxy. Poured purple in all the cracks. Well, some of the cracks from the underside. There's the next step. Holy cow, and that's only the side you're not even going to be looking at. Like it. I'll spare you the sanding saga. 36, 50, that took down the excess epoxy pretty decent. 80, 120, I don't even remember. 150, 220. Some of these cracks reappeared after I sanded off. I must have just had a thin layer of epoxy over it. So that's epoxy coat number, who the heck knows, a lot. So at least the 2 I just barely put on the top. There's still cracks in it, still soaking it up, so basically you just got to keep on putting on more layers until it stops soaking it up. So this is a 3rd coat I put on the top. The problem I keep on having, see if I can get that on film. There's some cracks, there's one. It just keeps on drinking up the resin. Just the more I put on, the more it just drinks it. So this is 3 coats. My advice is just put on as many as it takes, I guess. This one is starting to gel up a little bit. You can see it's super not smooth, so that's gonna have to be sanded down again, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because it'll take it down to the same level as these cracks. So hopefully it'll all look smooth after I sand it and then put 1 or 2 more coats on it. There you go, it's getting there. So coat number 4, here's the problem. I believe it's still soaking up a bunch of the resin, which is why it looks all ripply. I just brushed this on with a regular paintbrush. So if anything, it should have streaks in it, but it's kind of soaking into the wood still, which is crazy considering I've already put on 4 coats. So I think I'll have to buff and polish it to get to the flat finish that I want. Everything's coated good enough, but now I just need it flat and polished. The next thing I did, which is not 100%, but I routed out some little grooves in here so I can jam the LED lights up under the glass in there. And then you run it through here wherever it makes sense. Right there I drilled a hole. Drilled a couple of holes. Anyways, the whole point is to make the light shine up through this glass. So I think that'll work. You can really see how bad the epoxy coat is from that angle. See all those little pits in it? That'll be the next thing I fix. But I also wanted to coat these grooves with a little bit of epoxy so that way it's not sitting there soaking up water, getting trapped there without me noticing. There it is. I believe that would be the last coat. Now just got to mount it on the wall. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. We try to put out a video as often as we can with the different things that we build. If you're at all interested, I have another channel, and this channel focuses on the difficulties of getting a contractor's license and all the steps involved. It goes over bidding and a bunch of different things, and making a whole series of it. Feel free to subscribe to that channel and check it out. Thanks for watching.